Is Trump making America great right now?
Oh, me first. It's a complex issue. I'm not a partisan guy that constantly is a cultist or upholds values to an individual. I like policy. And when there's big, beautiful bills that a conservative can't stand, I'll call that out and criticize it. So I don't know if he's making America great again, but he's definitely better than the previous candidate, previous president, a whole lot better than what the Democrat Party can offer to us, whatever policy it is. No.
What's your rebuttal to that?
Yeah, I would say it's probably worse in every single measurable way.
In this video, Destiny silences this MAGA apologist for his mindless Trump defense. And we see how quickly that "I'm just about policy, not partisan" mask just falls apart for him. So David claims to be nuanced, but the second he opens his mouth, it's the same cookie-cutter MAGA defense of Trump. Destiny doesn't let it slide though, calling out how Trump's wrecked the rule of law, trashed Americans' foreign policy reputation, and even failed at delivering on conservative priorities like immigration. It's not about vibes or loyalty. Destiny constantly drags the conversation back to measurable outcomes, and the contrast just couldn't be clearer. So make sure to watch to the end to see how Destiny silences this MAGA apologist for his mindless Trump defense.
I think that the attack on the rule of law, I think, is really bad. I think all the lawfare that he's engaged in is really bad. Foreign policy-wise, I don't know if America's ever looked worse on the world stage, whether it comes to military stuff or economic stuff like trade deals. I think even for the things that conservatives might care about, I think that he is hurting those causes. I would say that the way he's approached like the theatrics related to ICE is really bad. The weaponization of like the invocation of the Alien Enemies Act, I think was bizarre. The El Salvador stuff. I just think that even if you did care ostensibly about some conservative platform, Trump has just done bad things for every part of what you could possibly care about.
Like immigration?
I would say probably, yeah.
Yeah. How so?
I think that when you roll by executive order, it can be rescinded by executive order. If all of his benefits at the border are addressed because of EOs that he's issued and he hasn't been able to champion or pass any kind of comprehensive immigration reform, I don't think it speaks well.
Able to deter the crisis that was happening at the southern border under the previous administration?
I mean, it depends on if you believe it was a crisis or not.
Well, the average American for consistently over a year said that the immigration, specifically what is happening at the southern border, is one of the most important issues for them. Why is that? If it's not a crisis?
Because I think Republicans told them.
And they also told Democrats as well, who are polled for saying more than 70% of the average Americans say that they don't want illegal immigrants crossing our border, especially taking advantage of various programs that we have here, whether they are Republicans or Democrats. So I'll ask you again, how is he able to deter illegal migrants from crossing the border at such a high level without passing any policy, any executive order, or whatever it is?
Well, I think there's a lot less people coming to America now, period. Tourism is down like 80% across almost every
We're not
industry.
talking about tourism.
No, but I'm just saying in general, like people are...
southern border.
Yeah, I'm just saying people, well, I mean, if less people are even trying to come here, then I imagine illegal crossings are probably down as well. I'm just saying that it's hard to believe that Americans genuinely care about a problem when, one, Trump killed the bill outside of office when Biden was in for his last year, and then nothing has been proposed in the meantime. And then two...
Again, but you don't need to reform the system in order to deter illegal migrants from wanting to come to the southern border, first of all, and then to illegally enter our country, right?
Sure. Was the goal just to bring illegal immigration to zero?
I don't know what is the goal of Democrats. All I look at it is from a...
Well, no, but I'm saying for Trump, I thought the goal was to like do something different with the immigration system to deal with like the 20 million illegal immigrants that are supposedly here already.
So Destiny doesn't waste any time here. He just dismantles David's whole narrative that Trump's been some kind of savior for conservative causes. He calls out Trump's attacks on the rule of law and his pattern of using lawfare like a weapon, reframing Trump not as a strong leader, but as someone actively undermining the very systems conservatives claim to value. Then he rips into Trump's foreign policy, pointing out that America looks worse than ever on the world stage, militarily, diplomatically, and even economically with trade. That hits hard because it undercuts the MAGA myth that Trump somehow made America more respected globally. And Destiny also drags David's defense of Trump's immigration theatrics. He highlights how the Alien Enemies Act was weaponized in a bizarre way and how the showmanship with ICE was all optics over real results. And when David tries to claim that Trump deterred the border crisis without any real policy, Destiny fires back with facts. Executive orders can be undone just as easily as they're signed. Without legislation or comprehensive reform, these so-called wins are temporary and meaningless. It's a clean and factual takedown that just exposes David's whole argument as shallow and built on headlines instead of real outcomes.
Sure, that is after the previous administration completely disregarded the rule of law and allowed so many people to come into their country and abuse asylum law. So instead of reforming the system, which I'm all for, when there is a crisis, do you reform the system or do you deter the crisis from happening?
So I don't think that there was a crisis.
What is 50,000 illegal immigrants crossing the border illegally, not through a port of entry, every single day, amounting to 3 million people illegally entering the country over a year? What do you call that? What do you tell the New Yorkers, the Chicago people, the Detroit people who aren't your traditional Republicans, going to council city meetings, stiffen it into their mayors, doing what?
If this was so much of a crisis, then why did Republicans kill the bill to cap the amount of illegals coming over?
We just saw that you didn't need a bill in order to deter illegal migrants
maybe
from
you can
coming
do it
to
through
the
EO, but we also see that when you do things via executive order, the judiciary will challenge you on a lot of stuff that you do. So why not do it with a piece of legislation?
What did this administration do differently in the first 30 days when it came down to illegal crossings that the previous administration didn't do?
Well, they're issuing harsh executive orders. And then two, I think America in general is a less attractive place to flee to at the moment.
It's a less.
But again, I think
when you have metropolitan cities giving you free everything,
nobody in America gets free everything.
Nobody in America gets free anything.
Free everything. Nobody's getting free everything.
Okay, I didn't say everything, but whatever.
Okay.
When an individual on the previous administration crossed the border illegally, not through a port of entry, what did they do with the individual?
It depends on if they meet a border guard and they try to claim asylum. It depends on if they're sneaking in through.
Okay.
But before
what
this, before this, I was saying before, if this was a crisis, it's very strange that there was a huge piece of legislation originally authored by a Republican that both halves of Congress are ready to support, and then it got shot down. And
what was that bill going to do to deter illegal migrants from coming to the southern border in the same way that they are not doing so now?
Well, it codified into law the same type of caps that President Trump is trying to put on
caps. We don't have caps right now, right, to deter migrants.
Well, one of the issues with the asylum seeking process was people could come forward in like these huge amounts of like record-breaking numbers and claim asylum. And if you had too many people that were doing this, you had too many people trying to claim asylum. One of the things the bill would have done was let you cap it and put a moratorium on it for 2 weeks.
We both agreed that there's an issue with the asylum process and people taking advantage of it. Mm-hmm. But when you have 15,000 people coming in on a daily basis,
that bill would have prevented that.
That would have not done a single. Okay, let me ask you this. We didn't pass a bill. We didn't reform the system whatsoever.
Yep.
And we deterred it by 99.8%.
And all the people that asylum seeking are still in this country. They're not gone. They're still here.
I care about them.
I do care. You don't. So what's a crisis then? So it wasn't a crisis then. Let's figure on that. Yeah.
What is the primary issue at the southern border previously under the previous administration? Is it the problem when they're already in the United States, or is it before they actually come into the United States?
The asylum seeking process.
What is the primary issue?
The asylum seeking process was the primary issue.
So you don't think that people entering the country, you don't think that people wanting it and being incentivized to come up to the southern border from all over the world, not just South America, but from all over the world, is not a problem? That's not the primary issue? Why do you care about
the reason why they
were already in the United States?
The reason why they were incentivized was because people realized, especially after COVID, that the asylum process was super abusable.
What did former President Biden do right after COVID in terms of immigration-related law?
So this is where Destiny really presses David on his weak framing, and it's just brutal. David leans on this border crisis narrative, tossing out big numbers like 15,000 crossings per day and millions of illegal entries a year. But Destiny flips it on him. If this was such a dire crisis, then why did Republicans kill a bipartisan bill that would have capped asylum claims and created a temporary moratorium that exposes the whole crisis as more of a political tool than an actual policy priority for Trump's allies? And when David brags that Trump's executive orders alone cut crossings by 99.8%, Destiny just doesn't let it slide. He points out how those actions are constantly challenged in the court, and how any EO can be undone by the next administration, meaning they're practically just temporary theater. Then Destiny redirects the debate to the real issue here. He argues that meaningful reform, like the killed bill offered, would have actually addressed the core problems instead of just playing whack-a-mole with the executive orders. It's a really sharp way he used to expose David's whole argument as performative rather than substantive.
He pulled out of the...
Are you going to say remain in Mexico?
Yeah.
So how many people did you say? Wait. How many people did you say a year were coming over illegally, or a day? You said 15,000.
15,000.
I think remain in Mexico was responsible for like 60,000
remain in
people.
Mexico do?
Remain in Mexico. First of all, we're not just going to play a quiz game, but I'll explain it since you like to ask so many questions.
No,
So remain in Mexico made it so that if you came to the United States
coming to the southern border,
60,000 remained in Mexico for their process.
That because
I just did.
Okay.
I didn't know you can see people will apply for process down there. But what I'm saying is that if you wanted, you could have done an actual immigration bill that would have addressed so many different layers of this problem, including the massive backlog we have of asylum seekers. And that was the issue.
You're super passionate about asylum seekers.
Because that was the issue. That was the problem.
You're super passionate about asylum seekers. I'll ask you this. Where do the super majority, not 50, 60%, more than 90% of asylum seekers, true asylum seekers, not bullshit asylum seekers, where did they seek asylum? If we're talking about Venezuelans.
Are we going to say like the country of first entry where they arrived at first?
They go to their neighboring country. More than 92%, according to statistics, actually go to their neighboring country. So let me ask you this. If you're facing legitimate asylum, first of all, are you going to track all the way up to the southern border, pay thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars sometimes because you're bringing your family to pay the cartels to then have a legitimate asylum case and then enter illegally, not through the port of entry? If you have a legitimate asylum case, you can adjudicate that in the United States with temporary protective status in the United States. You don't have to sit in Mexico and wait for your asylum case.
Why would they go for asylum over a TPS?
Why would they go for asylum over TPS? Because asylum is much easier to seek in the United States and then be granted TPS, right? When
TPS is limited.
Let me ask you this. When the individual entered the United States and is seeking asylum, what do they grant him?
What do they grant them?
Yeah, while they adjudicate their case.
Are you going to talk about how they issue them a receipt to show up at their case, and you're talking about relief?
Give them temporary protective status. Yeah, right.
Because they're waiting for their case to be adjudicated.
Of course, yeah.
So it would have been nice if we had more judges to adjudicate these cases, like the border bill would have given us.
It would be nice, like we have right now, a 99.8% reduction in amount of individuals not only crossing the border illegally,
so that
but coming to the.
So the number is not true. Just to be clear, the number is not real. But
yeah, those are real, but it's fine. It's the usual step.
What is Trump doing to get rid of the? What is Trump doing to get rid of the 5 or 10 million asylum seekers that are already in the United States?
He's trying every legal means that he can possibly can.
So nothing. So he hasn't done anything.
Well, did he try and enact the Aliens Enemies Act to remove individuals out of the country with limited due process and no process?
From that act requires us to be at war with the country or for them to be invaded us, which is probably not true.
Well, okay. Well, there's actually a really detailed article about.
To be clear, there's absolutely no detailed argument about how that can work. The only way that it does is to confound basically the gangs with the actual Venezuelan government, and to say because they have some members that are inside the government that account
report about how the Venezuelan government, the Maduro regime, trained paratroopers to come into the United States, go to various states in the United States. Again, I don't really give a shit about that.
Oh, I thought you said you cared about policy and rule of law. I do.
Clearly you don't. Apparently you don't, because you don't think that 15,000 people coming into the country illegally on a daily basis is not a problem. And
I did think it was a problem. That's why I supported the bill.
Well, you just said, no,
but I prefer to have legislation from Congress for immigration rather than just executive orders from the president.
It's not a crisis.
Do you think executive orders are better, or do you think legislation
from New Yorkers? Can we finish?
Like, what do you think?
Point, or you
no, because you just keep it's like a quiz. I'm curious. Do you think that it would have been better to pass the bill or just to do things via executive action?
I think it's better to deter. When
you don't have an answer to that? Is it better to have comprehensive border legislation or an executive order that can be rescinded by the next president?
It's a crisis. You deter the crisis from happening. And once you don't have a crisis anymore, you can focus on reforming the immigration law.
So if after 4 years, if Trump doesn't have an immigration bill, do you think that would have been a failure of this administration?
I think that if they don't reform the asylum and close the loopholes when it comes down to asylum now that we don't have the crisis at the southern border, I think that'll be a failure by the administration. Absolutely. But it's a whole,
Then we'll wait and see what happens in 4 years when they don't have another border bill.
Well, we'll come back here in about 3.5 years.
Okay.
So Destiny wraps this up by really exposing how flimsy David's entire defense is. David keeps throwing out big numbers and dramatic border crisis language, but when he's pressed on actual solutions, he just leans on temporary fixes and theatrics instead of meaningful reform, pointing out how Trump hasn't delivered lasting immigration policy, just flashy executive actions that don't survive legal challenges and do nothing for the millions already here. It's the perfect ending, because David's arguments just crumbled because they're all based on vibes and fear-mongering, while Destiny just keeps dragging it back to measurable outcomes and policy substance. It really shows how bias drives these defenses, dressing up partisan loyalty as just caring about policy. And speaking of bias,
are you getting tired of getting news from biased news sources? One outlet says one thing and another says the complete opposite? How are you supposed to know what's actually true? That's where ground news comes in. It lets you compare how different media outlets, whether it's left, right, or center, are covering the same story, so you can see the full picture instead of just the echo chamber. And here's the best part. Click the link in the description and get a 40% off the Vantage tier, which gives you even deeper insights in media bias and political trends. So stay informed, think for yourself, and check out ground news in the description down below.